Hi, I'm Lauren Van Mullum from Truer Words by Lauren, and I'm here with Joy Choquette. Did I pronounce that? It's a
Yes,
soft SH sound. I love it.
perfect.
And Joy is a ghostwriter for newsletters and blog posts and website content, which is exactly the person you need when you are a business owner and you want something that sounds exactly like you, but you don't want to write it yourself. And I'm super excited to talk with you because that is what I do not do, but I've done it in the past. I don't do it anymore. I just do copy now for coaches. And I'm always looking for somebody to refer them to when they don't have the time, or they just, some people hate writing. I am sympathetic. I can't math, and they need somebody else to take that off of their plate. So I wanted to dig into this because your specialty is like newsletters, and I love helping people figure out their newsletters. I did content coaching for a while because I love talking about it. How do we make these better? How do we beat the spam folder that everybody's newsletter tends to fall into? How can we keep these newsletters so relevant that they get opened? Because open rates are terrible, right? Like across the board. It's
Yeah.
really hard. So your website, I want to say it before I forget, is your name, joychoquette.com.
Yes. Yep.
And yeah, let's talk newsletters. So why newsletters? That's my first question. Why are we marketing through newsletters at all?
Well, I think that newsletters really still offer that very personal connection. And when you think back about paper letters that we used to get in the mail, it was always so exciting to like go to the mailbox and find like a little card or a real letter, that maybe had come from across the country or maybe even a different part of the world. It was so exciting and thrilling. And I think in a way that newsletters still impart that same kind of maybe if not excitement, at least that same personal connection. So we're sharing something about our company, but also ourselves in the newsletter. I don't think that for the most part, unless you're like a big company like Nike or something, it shouldn't just be kind of like sales ads coming in people's inboxes. So you definitely you have that opportunity to really connect with the people that are receiving your newsletter. And there's been so many times when people have reached out to me after I've written one of my newsletters with like, oh, can you clarify this? Or, oh, this, I'm so glad you talked about XYZ because I really have been struggling with that. And it felt so good to know that somebody else was on the same page. So I think it definitely still offers or has the potential to offer that kind of personal connection.
I'm so glad you made that comparison between getting like an actual letter in the mail, like a snail mail written out in cursive, maybe, let's get fancy, in the mail, because that is not the experience most newsletters deliver. That's not even the experience most mailboxes deliver right now. I mean, in the
Right.
mailbox and in our virtual mailbox, it's a bunch of spam, it's a bunch of ads, it's a bunch of bills, and it's no fun.
Yeah.
So I love bringing it back to personal. And that's my approach with newsletters too, is if it's not personal, if it's not just as personal as an intimate written letter between two people, I'm not reading it.
Right.
Those are the ones that like hit the spam folder really fast, is the ones that
Mhm.
don't have that personal connection.
Yes, that's definitely true. And I think that there's a really good opportunity for us as business owners or for business owners themselves just to be able to share a little bit, not only kind of behind the scenes, but also about them as a person. Even if you're not a solopreneur, there's still a way to share about your team or about your work environment or your culture, something that just really helps the receiver of your newsletter to get a better feel for what's going on in your particular area.
So I think there are a lot of preconceived notions about newsletters from the way they have been done in the past. Um, and I'm curious about the trends you're seeing in newsletters right now versus the trends that we have experienced in the last, I don't know, decade, because there's a lot of newsletter stuff out there that soured a lot of us against them. It's like, oh, I don't want to do a newsletter. They're boring. Nobody opens them. What's the difference between those old boring ones and these new ones that are fun?
Yeah. What a wonderful concept, right?
Crazy.
Well, it's true what you said earlier also that the open rates for newsletters, I just read a statistic, I think it was like a week or two ago, and it said industry average. I don't know. Do you know this, Lauren, already? Do you know that the open rate?
It depends on the industry, but I do know like a range of open rates across industries, and
Mhm. Yeah.
very. So
It's
yeah,
actually, it's estimated that it's about 25% across all industries. So if you looked at everybody all together, about 25%. So that is pretty low. And I think we kind of went through it. The newsletter kind of trajectory reminds me a lot of blogs. How when blogs started, they were very personal and fun, and everybody was excited to read them and share them and start one and start sharing their own ideas and thoughts on things. And then, kind of over time, you saw that they started to get very like salesy and flashy and very like hyper polished, and they stopped feeling like those little peeks into people's lives and into their interests and into even like behind the business type posts. And it started to be a lot more like affiliate links and here, buy this. And so I feel like the email newsletters have kind of gone a similar path where we started out here and it was really fun and exciting and cool and new. And then it kind of dipped down into more like commercial land. But
yes.
I do feel like it's coming out of that, I think. And I think that the difference, like you asked, between kind of where it was at its low point and where it is now is that personal connection and the storytelling and the ability to go a little deeper into a company's content. So not everybody is going to take the time to go out and read your blog if you have a blog, or they may miss half the things you post on social media, but the email is coming right to them. And so there's a better chance if you can get a really good headline that catches their attention, or if you're just known for providing really good email content, it really helps for people to actually like look out for your email newsletter and for that to be kind of a little something like to brighten their day. And that's the kind of thing that you want to write.
A lot of my clients, a lot of the people I've talked to about their newsletters, they're surprised when I say you have to train people to open your newsletter.
Mhm.
Because if you haven't sent a newsletter in a long time, if you used to send newsletters and they were kind of salesy and terrible and just like, announcing things about your business and it wasn't really engaging, you've trained people not to open your newsletters. And so if you're starting from that place, you're already behind the game and you have to retrain them. That takes time. And if you're starting a brand spanking new newsletter, it also takes time to train them to expect every time they open something from you, it's delightful.
Right. Yes.
This is
Yeah,
not an overnight thing.
right. Yes. Like a lot of content marketing, it's kind of you're playing the long game. So it's definitely more of a marathon. You have to have more of that marathon outlook than like the sprint. I'm going to hurry up and get this done and see the people come pouring in.
So I'm thinking another way I think of my newsletter, just my own, it is the content I put in my newsletter is distinct from my blog. It's very different because I write the blog for cold leads, like people coming straight off the internet. They found me through SEO. They don't know me. And maybe they're looking for something about copywriting for coaches. And then I write the blog for them. My newsletter, those are my besties. Those are my intimates. Those are people who know me and they already like agreed that, maybe we could start on this road to friendship. That is totally how I think of it. And it's very different. I'm writing to them like it's that letter to a friend. So I know you do both. How do you approach blogs versus newsletters?
Yeah, I think you are right on the money with that. I think when you are, like you said, somebody's coming to your blog or to your site from just Google or wherever they're coming from, that is more of a cold lead. So while your tone on the blog, mine always tends to be similar in that it's conversational and friendly, and you try to be warm, but there's something different about writing for kind of the great unknown versus your newsletter people who like you and know you and trust you enough to share their email with you. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like there's more of a connection. They're more likely to interact with me or, with you, whoever the newsletter sender is. They're much more likely to hit reply and ask you a question or follow some of the links that you provide in the newsletter. So there is definitely it's a more receptive audience, I think.
That's my favorite part, is when I get replies. It just
I love that too.
which and I think it's such an important barometer of how well you're doing, is if you're getting replies like you did just write to one single person, you were doing it right.
Yeah, definitely. Or if you ever have the wonderful treat of having somebody email you separately, or when you run into them somewhere at an event or something and they tell you, oh, I just love your newsletter. It's one of the only ones I read every month because you always have like those little personal stories, and I love whatever. I always get like helpful information from it. That is like, oh, I did my job.
Yes. So the big question is, how do we make that happen? How do we make it happen where somebody comes up and says, I love your newsletter. It was, what are the components? Maybe there's a structure. What's the magic that happens to make a newsletter that people love opening?
Yeah, I think you're right that I'm not sure. I think structure is a good word. I don't think you necessarily have to have a formula that you stick tightly to every single newsletter, but I do think that there is something to be said for having a general kind of outline to use where people know what to expect. So maybe you start with a little personal story, and then that ties into some company news, and then that ties into an upcoming event, and then you maybe leave them with a single call to action, like, hey, if you found this helpful, you might also want to check out this book, or you might also want to know that I'm speaking at this event, or you might want to join this free webinar. So just something simple at the end that helps transition them, if they want, into one area. But I think that having that familiarity each month or week or however often you're sending, I think that's very helpful because it is almost like getting a letter. And so, it's every once in a while you can like throw in a postcard, right? You could do just a short little announcement email, but for the most part, you want something that's got a little bit more meat to it, something that brings them through kind of a whole process.
Yeah, it's that. Also, I love how quickly you were just able to rattle off a really solid structure. That is the mark of a pro. But so when we're thinking of what to put in there, for me, having a personal story up top is a non-negotiable. Without that, I don't think it works. At least in my inbox, it will not survive unless there's that personal connection right up top. And then what I've seen in the newsletters that keep the survivors,
Mm-hmm.
And in my own, because I try to emulate the survivors, they segue from the personal into some sort of educational component, a philosophical component, a big idea. I work with a lot of coaches, so maybe they start with a thing that they've been struggling this week, and then they open it up to how they figured it out for themselves using their tools.
Right.
But there is that didactic, instructive quality. How do you balance personal with the instructive?
Yeah, I think it can be tricky and it might feel a little awkward at first. And just trying to think of your newsletter as kind of this growing like little environment, like its own little ecosystem is helpful. So at the beginning, maybe you're not giving it enough water, or it might be getting a little bit too much light or whatever, but you can tweak things and test things over time until you get the balance just right for your audience. But I think tying in that personal, like you said, is absolutely key. And I like to recommend also that it's right up top, because that's like the most important part of your letter. They want to connect with you. They don't want just a sales flyer in their email, in their inbox. And so I think trying to work out that piece that will tie together the personal with either an educational portion or a product or whatever it is that you want to talk about business wise. It's very similar to going to like a meeting or a networking event. You want to make a personal connection with the person first, and especially if you can find something that you both have in common that you can relate to each other on a certain level before you jump into like, hey, what do you do? Or, here's something that might help you. I'm offering X, Y, and Z. But none of that is going to be effective if you immediately jump into that without exchanging some pleasantries and, maybe telling the person a little bit about yourself, or even more importantly, asking a little bit about them.
Oh, I love that. So talk to me about length, because this is one of those questions that when you've been writing for as long as we have, I think we forget that it's a question on people's minds, because for me, it takes as long as it takes to do what it needs to do. But people will ask me, well, how long does that need to be? Where does your word count range in a newsletter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never actually checked my word count, but for me, like my rule of thumb that I use is that if I'm sending, or if a client is sending, say monthly, it's okay to go a little bit longer, because you've got this like full newsy, delicious, whole meal for them to enjoy. If you're sending something weekly or every other week, I recommend that it be a little shorter, because it's a lot of information to come up with. So it just puts a lot of pressure on you to be creating these like very lengthy emails every week or every other week. And then B, it's also, you do have to be mindful of your readers' time, and likely they're not going to want to read through, a whole long newsletter every single week. So that's kind of how I play it out. It may also have a little bit to do with your business, with your company. So if you're a solopreneur versus a small coaching group, then there may be some overlap, but there may also be opportunities to provide different types of newsletters, depending, like if you wanted each of the coaches to have a say each month, or maybe they each have like a little segment within the newsletter that they're responsible for. That can all be taken into consideration. But I would say if you're just starting, or if you're just kind of relaunching your newsletter, I would go a little bit on the longer side, but make sure to break up all those sections so that somebody doesn't feel overwhelmed by this like giant wall of text.
Yes, just like a blog post, or a sales page or anything, you've got to break it up. People's attention spans need help to keep on track. So it's a kind of a interesting process because we're placing so much emphasis on this personal aspect. But when you are working with a ghostwriter, they are not you. They do not live in your head. They don't live in your life. So with your clients, what would you love them to give you in terms of materials so you can create this really personal experience as if you were them?
Right. That's a great question.
I know ghostwriters, because I did it, we never get exactly what we need. Like, it's really rare that somebody gives us everything we need.
Right. Yes. Yep. So one thing that's helpful is when I first start working with a client, we kind of go over the project and I have like a little questionnaire. And then depending on what their goals are with the blog or the email newsletter, whatever it is I'm writing for them, that helps me to figure out what kind of information that I need from them. So, for instance, there was a coach that I was working with recently, and I was completely new to his life. I didn't really know much about him other than what I had read on his website. And he was wonderful to work with. He just, whatever I needed, he would say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll get you that. Okay, I'll get you that. So that helps, especially in the beginning. Know that when you're working with a ghostwriter, it's going to take a little bit more time because they are just getting acclimated to your business, but also trying to get in your voice, kind of in the voice of your company. So some of that can be done online through, reading through their website, maybe previous blog posts, that kind of thing. It's helpful if they've written any newsletters in the past to get a few samples of those. And then you can kind of even analyze what you think worked and didn't work. And yeah, other than that, I would say just to make sure like the values, their values and what they are hoping to share with their audience, make sure those are crystal clear, because that really helps everything, everything you write, to make sure that you're, that those, that they're solid, and then you can kind of write around those key pieces.
That is so good. The values component was the most important thing when I was ghostwriting for such a long time. And you get these long-term ghostwriting client relationships, and like we were best friends. I mean, for the longest time. And then she changed her business and she didn't need a ghostwriter, and we kind of fell out of touch. But like, her values came through with every single thing that she wrote, and it actually taught me so much, because she was, very, very ethical, very aware of diversity and inclusion. And I learned how to be better with those things from her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a wonderful relationship when it works the way it should.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's key too, Lauren. Just that will make the whole newsletter writing process. I mean, basically all of the writing that you're doing for your business, but especially the newsletter writing, I think it's going to be a lot more simple and clear and easy to do if you have that value. If you know what those values are and they're very clear and familiar to you.
So this is a weird question, because I don't think I hear it a lot from clients who they've never used a ghostwriter. They're not really, they just think it's this very strange thing, which it kind of is, but because I have so wholeheartedly made this switch into ethical marketing, I'm just like gnawing at the big idea of like, what are the ethics of ghostwriting? Because what I know in my core is that it doesn't feel icky. It doesn't feel like it's fake. It feels like I am just sort of channeling this information from this other person, and it's really coming from them through me.
Yeah. I think of it as kind of almost like our role as the ghostwriter is like a communications assistant. So it's almost like if the person the business owner is, say, a public speaker. Well, they're excellent at being in front of a crowd, and they know when to pause and when to give a meaningful look and when to, do all these things to keep the audience really engaged. And for me, it's just another form of communication. It's just that a public speaker may not have those gifts and abilities on the written page. And so that's where I'm kind of just assisting them to get their ideas and thoughts and values to their audience in a different way. So it's still their information, it's still their views and their values. It's just coming through me in written form rather than perhaps the way that they usually communicate.
That is so true. So many of my clients, they were phenomenal business people. They were just like, big hearted, wonderful humans, and they were amazing face to face. Like they could talk a blue streak, but they fell apart when it came to words. And I understand that because I fall apart with numbers. I mean, like quivering mass of jelly if there's a number involved. And I would outsource that in a second. So I think of that sort of as a parallel thing. Like we shouldn't be held back from what we do amazingly well because we can't do this one thing. Let's find somebody who can do that one thing so we can contribute to the world in a beautiful way.
Exactly. Yes.
Do you have any tips for the DIYers out there who are trying to make their newsletter better? Maybe increase their open rates?
Yeah, I would start with, first, what I would start with is looking back at anything that you've done newsletter wise. So if you have started and stopped, a lot of people get really excited about newsletters at one point, or they hear about the value and they jump on board and they write like maybe 2 or 3 months worth, or they mean to write every month, but it doesn't happen and they get busy. So just if you have any kind of back information, any kind of statistics, go back and see like which were the best performing, and that will help you maybe to get the subject line better, or more, to get a better open rate with the subject line that you're using. A question sometimes works well in the subject line, or if you think of the subject line as though you're fishing, like that's your hook. So you want it to be something that makes the person go, oh, what? Wait a minute, what? Maybe read it again. Something that will entice them to open the email itself. And then beyond the subject line, and there's all kinds of information online. I'm forgetting, I think it's Copy Blogger, or if you just Google like writing a fantastic subject line, you'll find many articles on that. And then as far as the newsletter itself, I would really just focus on that personal piece above all else and put it right up front and center. And if you're not exactly sure like what's appropriate, I don't want to, share too much information. What is a good balance? Definitely people could sign up for your wonderful newsletter, Lauren, and get some tips and ideas on how to do that. But really just, it can be something as small as something that you notice on the way driving to drop off your kid at school, or something that you noticed while you're waiting in line at the bank. I think all through the day, if we're aware, we can come across those little incidents that like tie into something in our work lives or in the work that we're doing that's making the world a better place. So just try to be aware for those little bright spots and see if you can't use one of those in your newsletter.
Oh, I love that tip. One of the ideas that I got from one of my clients is she keeps an idea box on her desk.
Yeah.
And I got this cute little vintage box, and this is my idea box, and it's got these little 3x5 cards whenever I have an idea for my newsletter.
That's fantastic. I love tactile things. So for me, like anything off the computer I love like little scrappy pieces of paper. I love journals, books, So yeah, that's fun. And it's always right there. So then that kind of sparks you to remember like, oh, I haven't added to that lately. Maybe that would help you even to be a little bit more aware as you go throughout the day, looking for those.
Oh, I love it. See, is there anything that should not be in a subject line?
Well, I would just veer away from making it like too clickbait-ish. So you want it to be open, but you don't want to promise something or give the premise of something that's not going to actually be in the newsletter, because that's probably going to get you more people unsubscribing. So that's not the direction that you want to go. Other than that, I would definitely never put any kind of profanity or, just the things that are kind of, if you wouldn't post it on LinkedIn, you probably shouldn't put it in your subject line.
Yeah, subject lines are the hard ones. Those are the hard ones for me. It's sort of like writing a headline on website copy. It's the most important part. You should spend the most time thinking about what that's
Right.
going to be, because its success or failure determines the success or failure of everything that comes after it.
Right. And sometimes what I find is helpful, because it can be a lot of pressure when in my email program that I use, you have to do the subject line first, and then you go in and do the body. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I can't think of anything. And so sometimes what I'll do is just go ahead and write the newsletter and then look for that one key thing that's like the most interesting, or some insight that maybe I discovered as I was writing the newsletter, and try to incorporate that into the subject line. So you can always go back and tweak those subject lines. And sometimes it's easiest to just do them at the end.
Yes, which is also how I write the headers. For my
Yes, me
website.
too.
It's the last thing that gets done, because by then you've really processed everything.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. That's my list of questions. Is there anything that you want to add, or anything that you're doing that you'd like to tell folks about?
Well, just thank you so much for this opportunity. This was really fun. And it's always so lovely to chat with fellow writers. And as far as new things, I am working on some full-length manuscripts for clients, ghostwriting, nonfiction. And the areas that I mostly work in would be like health and wellness, well-being, psychology, and also personal and professional development. So like you, some coaches, that kind of thing. But yeah, so that's something that I'm very excited about, and looking forward to seeing how that goes.
That's fantastic. So anybody out there who's like, I want to write a book, but you don't actually want to write a book, this is it. And that is totally me. Like I hate writing, but I love having written.
Yeah. I'm all about the first draft. That is my very favorite. I love, love, love. The books that I have written, the first draft is always like my happy place. And then I'm like, oh, now I have to revise.
Then it's the work. Yeah.
Then it's work.
Well, thank you so much. And I will
Thank
put
you.
your website in the notes, and some of the highlights. And yeah, thanks for this awesome conversation about newsletters and how to get them out of the spam folder, back into the inbox.
That's right. We want to liberate the newsletters.
Free the newsletters. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.